Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Blackberry Smoke, called Like an Arrow. If you all saw my Whiskey Myers review about a month or so ago, you knew this review was coming. Hell, even if you didn't see that, you probably would expect that I'd cover Blackberry Smoke's newest album, especially considering how much I liked their last album, Holding All the Roses, early in 2015. The compositions and grooves were tighter than they had ever been, the production was better than ever courtesy of legend Brendan O'Brien, and the lyrics showed the band taking southern rock tropes into fresh new directions that sure were a little bit more high concept, especially when the instrumentation got a little bit more experimental along the way, but also managed to stick the landing rather well. In short, it was easily Blackberry Smoke's best album to date, and it also went to #1 on the US country album charts. This is a band, I should remind you, with no crossover singles, no big radio push, and while you could give some credit to the release not facing huge competition earlier in the year, it was also another sign of the sea change that's been happening within country music, especially on the album charts. And also keep in mind, they hit #1 after leaving Zac Brown's Southern Ground label. They did this off the independent label Rounder, and that says a lot, especially in country music. So when you hear that they're planning to follow it up with a record this year that they also produced themselves, well, I'm always cautious about this sort of thing, but I was not going to miss covering it, especially if they could keep up their momentum. So how does Like an Arrow shoot, for lack of better words? Well, here's the thing. This is one of those records that kind of cut through most of my critical faculties to hit a real sweet spot in terms of sound and style. It's 70s inspired southern rock with modern texture and muscle, with writing that's smart enough to back it up. That's just a winning combination in my books, especially considering how damn well Blackberry Smoke pulled this off. Now, does it have the insane high points of Holding All the Roses, or was it as ridiculously tight as that album was? Arguably not quite, but I'd still say this is better as a whole, falling into the same category as that Gotthard album Bang that I covered back in 2014, reaching the upper echelons of albums in 2016 on consistent strength, great solos, and fantastic hooks all the way. In other words, yeah, this is probably one of the best albums of the year. I enjoyed the hell out of this. But it's also the sort of album that is so damn consistent in its strengths that it's kind of difficult for me to talk about. So for a change, let me get my nitpicks out of the way first. Like Holding All the Roses, I'm not wild about some of the more lo-fi pickups on some of the vocals, which is even switched to a compressed filter on the title track. I know, I get why it's here, trying to make things sound a little rougher, but it just doesn't really need to be there, especially with how much of a vocal powerhouse Charlie Starr is. He sounds plenty rough all by himself. And I can also say there are a few songs that can run a tad long and don't quite evolve as much as I would like, with the two big examples being with What Comes Naturally and Running Through Time. Although the outro and the closer, Free on the Wing, does get close to this as well. Although the contributions of Greg Allman from the Allman Brothers Band more than makes up for it. That song really is awesome, even if the outro does go a little long. And really, that's it. Seriously, I can't find a lot of problems with this album. And while I'll admit part of it is because I'm a sucker for this brand of southern rock that had prominence in the 70s and 80s, Blackberry Smoke approached this sound with a modern enough touch to never feel like a throwback, especially in the production. I was initially quite concerned that production in-house might lead to some real serious missteps, but it's clear the band was learning from their previous producers because the sonic palette of this album is everything I wanted it to be, plus more. The acoustic guitars come through with plenty of rattling, warm texture, the bass lines are prominent, and on songs like the title track and Ought to Know, they do plenty of work contributing to the counterbalance of the melody, and while the drum work doesn't quite get progressive, it still has well-balanced sandy texture to work with the country and blues tones. It really fits quite well. And then you have the keyboards, either the richer warble of more of the organ, or the saloon piano, adding just enough melodic embellishment to further drive these amazing hooks. But what I really need to call out are the electric guitar tones, because Blackberry Smoke got the perfect balance, blend, and variety to really round out this album. From the scuzzy, nasty muscle of Let It Burn and What Comes Naturally, the title track that just gets heavy as hell on the bridge, the huge snarl, the solo of Sunrise in Texas, the sizzling melodic riff on Ought to Know, and the faster Working for a Working Man, all the way to the more warbling tones of Running Through Time, or the higher tones of the solos of The Good Life or Ain't Gonna Wait, which has such a great, warm 70s singer-songwriter flavor, I had to love it. And really, the solos are so good too, most because Blackberry Smoke are smart enough to incorporate some of the melodic elements in the solo running through the rest of the song into the foundation there, and to a lot of the grooves that do wonders for these songs' momentums. And that's not even touching on the, no joke, the country funk rock of Believe You Me. I'm not going to say the experiment entirely works, but it's easily as loose and rough-edged as it would need to be to pull this off. And when the track does open up with a little bit more fire and some of the guitar tones, it's got a lot of personality. I'm not going to call this a failure. It's a pretty damn good song. But let's get real here. The one consistent strike for me against a lot of Southern rock are the lyrics and the themes. And yet, just like Holding All the Roses, I think Blackberry Smoke really do deliver here. Part of this is that they avoid the vast majority of pitfalls where Southern rock acts can occasionally stumble. No overbearing Southern pandering, no casual misogyny, and when the swaggering machismo does come through and song like What Comes Naturally, it's tempered by an acknowledgement that even as he kind of gets screwed over by this girl, he's happy enough to have that fleeting connection. He's not really bitter or resentful about it. I think it helps that Blackberry Smoke speak with more age and maturity than most of their modern contemporaries, aiming a little bit higher in their writing as they have to toe the harsh line that they set for themselves and deal with the consequences of that. They might have some of their mischievous fun watching Nashville go up in flames and Let It Burn, a fantastic song by the way, but they then temper it with Like an Arrow and Ain't Gonna Wait and the frustration of working for a working man. Sure, some of these concepts can feel a little bit broad. Believe You Me basically operates on the what goes around comes around system, but as a song, it's also very much aware that any bits of wisdom that he got along the way should be questioned. And it's what makes songs like Ought to Know and Running Through Time not just a celebration of maturity or age that knows best. Sure, with time does come some wisdom and foresight to know that abandoning friends and going hard will eventually come back to bite you in the ass, but there's also something to admire about that youthful spark, mostly in the admission that they're all following the same through line and thought process regardless of age. You don't change that much between when you're old and young. It's why The Good Life has so much poignancy in describing a hard-bitten cowboy father passing down life's lessons and isn't afraid to actually show emotion, or why Free on the Wing works in the aftermath of a breakup. Things they didn't work out, they might both find happiness later down the road, there's no bitterness there, or maybe not, he can't know. In the apocalyptic, uncertain world that is defined from the very first song, the only thing you can hold on to is your principles and your code, and even that, it's not a guarantee. And as songs like Sunrise in Texas know, any luck that it brings you should be cherished, because let's be honest, not everybody else in the world can have that level of luck or success. In other words, this record reminds me a lot of Texas country artist Cody Jinks's release I'm Not the Devil from earlier this year. And while I do indeed love that album, Blackberry Smoke's Like an Arrow takes that same broad focus and lends it better hooks, better solos, more texture, and more firepower. It clearly draws a lot from the Southern rock of the past, but it knows how to update it with energy, swagger, and sharper writing than I think anybody could have expected going in. In other words, I can see this being among my absolute favorites of 2016, because it's getting a very light 9 out of 10 and the highest of my recommendations. If you like rock or country of any stripe, this is required listening for you. But you know what, even if you don't, Blackberry Smoke might just change your mind with Like an Arrow. Definitely check this out, it's one of the best of this year. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so if you all want to agree with me and say that this album is just that awesome, there's your opportunity. But seriously, I've heard some mixed reviews on this, with some people saying it's not quite as good as Holding All the Roses, but I think it is, especially when you compare it with a lot of the instrumentation, which is so much more diverse and just hits so well. So many good hooks on this album. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. I'm steadily getting through my backlog there, so I might be able to start taking more requests soon. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.